need to give away money. We can just give people the tools that they need to make that money themselves. Thank you.
Is that the end of statement?
Yeah, end of statement.
Carl?
Yes?
Go ahead.
Okay. Personally, I believe that, yes, these social programs are extremely important, and being able to support the issues rather than just directly giving money is extremely important. I do agree with my opponent here that this directly giving money is not necessarily the best stance that we should be able to take. Supporting social programs such as maybe increased lower income housing and a bunch of different things is definitely needed. Some other issues is going to be especially with the lower income bracket is making sure that we can set them up in such a way that but setting them up in a way that they can not only make money for themselves, but they can impact the lessons that they learned onto other players, to other people, so that they may too can continue the tradition without government influence. And that was my statement for now.
The next person would be answering that statement would be Vitler. What is your stance on that?
Personally, yes. The social programs of giving money to those who need it, it's a great idea. It's been benefiting our nation and benefiting the new players who join the server and don't have as much and need a boost up. But I think one of the bigger problems we face with our social programs and people getting their housing is how inflated the economy has gotten. And every property, whether it become worth 20K, in the next day, the next week, it'll become worth 200K. Just if you look at our West Hedge houses, I think that one of the biggest solutions would be setting maximum prices that you can sell certain properties for based on what the government think that it's right. And along with that, I would like to continue and work with Mr. O'Leary on his construction project that he's been going through with Gallifrey. It gives the lesser deserved people, those who aren't financially stable, a way to get a house and get settled without needing that financial support as much. And we can put that tax money back into other programs. End of statement.
Okay. I'll conclude that question. We'll move on to the next one. The open debate will be at the end regarding just overall the topic instead of having open debate for each question. So I'll switch the order this time. This time I'll be Vitler starting. So Vitler, how do you plan on diversifying the business aspect of the Next Nation and revitalizing it in a sense? Because as we know, the business economy has been rather depressing for the last couple of years. So how does your administration plan on revitalizing that?
I definitely agree. The whole aspect of businesses have been really falling, and most of that has been based off of because we have too much support from the server itself, which would be admin shops. And those admin shops that are created in the server, even though I can't change it, I can push for that change as president. And we need to take out more admin shops and give more of the player base the opportunity to sell the materials they can provide for people. Not only will they get income from it, but it'll also create a business aspect. I also have a plan to promote the sporting industry, which has been a very big attraction for Santa Maria. A lot of people don't notice it, but the VFL brings in countless dollars and countless people to Santa Maria, even though it's considered the dead state. I would love to create a social program and to benefit businesses and allow them to advertise more frequently, even through the government itself, and somehow help them communicate with other people. And I also think that farmers especially, there's a lot of people who could go out and farm, but they just can't be selling to people when they have the convenience of going to those admin shops. So there would have to be a little bit of communication to the administration, but I think we could get that done. End of statement.
Carl.
Further on the kind of the business aspects, I personally have visited many businesses in my short time back here, but I just noticed that a lot of people seem to ignore that kind of role play possibility of having businesses where maybe going to get a drink with a friend, encouraging casual spending, doing something where not necessarily, well, it's not necessarily needed, but can create a definitely it can create a definite situation for role play where, for fun in general, for friends, for commodity. Beyond this, you do have issues regarding admin shops brought up my opponent. This is an issue that I tackled on directly during my adminship. Personally, in my experience, we found that most of the time players could not keep up with some aspects in business, and admin shops had to essentially substitute for the player based in that regard. I do encourage this kind of behavior to be able to shop and freely among players. I want that kind of behavior. And while admin shops are there, they're necessary for most cases. Other things include like the sports industry. I personally believe there are tons and tons of industries that are available for that they're available to be created by creative players out there, and we need to be able to encourage that. Farmers are another one. Actually, personally, I would like to see the implementation of personal farm plots. This would be for within protected plots that would be able to only farmers would be able to purchase and rent and be able to supply their profession without having to use the use of the wilderness. And I'll end my statement there.
Is it my turn? All right. So a big part of the problem with business on Vindex is that there's a lot of people who really want to make a business. Like they come on the server and they're like, wow, I really have an idea and I think I can make it happen. But because Vindex, when you first join, it's so complicated and you might not understand everything, people will often just stop. They won't realize that their ideas aren't exactly feasible on the server. So what I propose we do is first, we have to inspire these people to create their businesses. We have to give them the ideas that they have, the ideas that they can use to actually make their own money. If we give them ideas for things like creating gunpowder farms or interior designing or creating skins or just drawing, those are businesses that have made tons of money in the past. We just need to inspire those people to create businesses like that in the future. Additionally, especially with gunpowder farms, because that's something that a lot of people need. Everyone needs gunpowder. In almost every single job, you need a gunpowder. And yes, the admin shops provide it, but often it's at a premium. So what we need to do is encourage people and teach them how they can sell gunpowder for less. If we can tell them how they can create these farms, then they will go out there, create the farms, and then we'll have much more business going on, much more, just a better economy, because we'll actually have people selling these things. Additionally, getting rid of admin shops, it sounds like it would really bring back the economy, but in reality, I believe that it would just make it extremely difficult for certain people to get these goods, because you can't exactly just predict that everyone is always going to have everything in stock, and people might just simply want to get something quickly. But we can't just remove the entire current system we have for getting people these things, because people might not meet the demand. We don't know that. It would make it so hard for building to get things from like the nether and the wild and things that places you think you really can't get at this point in Vindex. So I don't believe we should remove admin shops. Maybe making them more expensive, but removing them entirely would just be catastrophic to everybody who needs to build anything. Additionally, I agree with Carl that there are a lot of different things, like a lot of small things that people should do more, like going out to get a drink. And that also there's just a lot of businesses out there that people don't know about. And in order to promote these businesses,
Mr. Jackson, can you wrap up?
All right, I propose we create a business registry that shows all the businesses and how to get there and what they do and provides links to them so people can reach these people. Thank you. End statement.
Thank you. So one other big issue on inflation is how well do you consider it to be? Because some of the candidates up here do have a lot of money, and usually their voters won't have as much. So how large of a problem do you see inflation to be on Vindex? Mr. Jackson, you can start first and we'll work our way left.
So I believe that inflation in the housing market is simply a huge issue, as mostly anybody who on Vindex who's tried to buy a property has seen.
It's not just generally within the housing market that I'm asking for. I'm asking within
just in general.
In general.
Well, I'd say that it is there in general, but it's mostly within the housing market. I could say you could see it in people trying to hire construction companies or interior designers. It's often at outrageous prices just because there's a complete lack of supply of these people to provide the services. And also there is the issue of paychecks, but that's not really as big of an issue. But I believe that it's most prevalent and most people see it in the housing market. But I believe we can solve this issue by simply providing more housing. A lot of things have been started to work on that, such as the creative server, and I believe we can work with the administration to get more housing added. Additionally, with the issue of businesses charging a lot of money, the few businesses that there are, I believe that we can, if we add more businesses, then they'll have to sell their goods at a lower prices. That way, and that will naturally cause the prices of these goods and services to fall. End of statement. End of statement.
Carl, Mr.
Okay.
Arthur. Yep.
Okay. I think a lot of the issues come down to inflation's come down to abundance. Regarding back onto the topic of admin shop signs. Admin shop signs set a general price for certain items, and players usually have to sell below in order to remain competitive. This essentially halts inflation in the fact that there's an unlimited supply of these items that are available. The reason why you don't see bread or steak or anything go above a certain price is because admin shops are always there to keep that price down. With price, when it comes to the housing market, while this is an unpopular opinion to say, houses for sale, homes for sale. When I remember when I was on there, the price maintained around a 10 to 20,000 K price limit, not because they were undesirable houses, but they remained affordable for the general population. One of my proposed plans is using the already existing Wyndhams and dropping the resale value so that more, not necessarily housing becomes available, but more properties for purchase. Housing is definitely the thing that we need to increase in abundance in order to, how should I say, increase the abundance to a point where it's not necessarily undesirable to own a house, but it's also available for anyone who wishes to both spend the time, the money, and the hard work to achieve this goal. Inflation comes down in many different forms, but I feel like the main market that everyone's concerned about is the housing market. There's not necessarily a direct solution we can do, and I'm not necessarily certain what could work, but we do need more methods that allow us to set the price without directly setting a max cap or anything like that of that kind of nature.
Okay.
I'm done. End statement.
Really?
Yeah, I agree with my fellow candidate Carl here. When it comes to the admin shops, when it's not that holds the inflation down, and that's just because the admin shops are set so low. And that also ties back into our businesses. With such low prices for our admin shops, businesses aren't able to make as much money because they're competing against those admin shops and they're not able to sell at the price that they want. So my idea would be you wouldn't remove admin shops altogether, but maybe just raising the price of them depending on what it is. Maybe those rare materials that you can't exactly get, we could leave those at that price, but things like steak and chicken or food, water, everything else can be raised up, just so that it's just an equal balance. And then where everything is mostly inflated right now is mostly in the housing department, as the other candidates have said. And like I said before, with businesses and everything else, I believe that there should be a cap limit to what every property can sell for. And a good plan for that would be having an assessor. And an assessor, if any of you know what they are in real life, they go and they assess a house for its value, and then they would set that price, and then that's what the resale value could only be at it. Maybe it could vary a couple bucks here and there depending on how the house has changed with interior design. But there needs to be an overall cap limit to certain housing, like West Hedges, homes for sales, red houses, anything, because all in all, not every single person on the server is going to be able to make $1 million to have an affordable, semi-decent house. End of statement.
Okay. At this point, we're going to move up to open debate. I'm going to allow all the candidates to ask one another questions. I'm going to kindly remind all of you, you have 4 minutes for open debate. You will be timed. We ask that you do not slander one another and you act maturely.
I have a question before we start.
Mhm.
Are we going to talk about the police? 'Cause
This
that
is
a topic.
open debate in terms to inflation.
Understood.
Yeah, open debate for police, open debate for etc. etc.
Understood.
Okay, quick thing before we start. Whoever's fucking typing, I don't know who you
Carl. Carl.
Yeah, I'm just gonna stop typing. I have a mechanical keyboard, unfortunately.
So, you may begin your open debate.
Regards to the increased pricing and removing unnecessary admin shops, when I was admin, I attempted to make sure that these shops were mainly cut down to what was only unobtainable by the general population. However, later after my term, it was later re-added. Shops that were like what the shop you see now is what has been added, such as what was it, seeds, wood, building materials, stuff like that. How would you propose that we maintain to keeping it from being piled upon as it was before?
Who are you referring to, me?
Yes. Sorry, I should refer.
Yeah, sure. No, I agree. I think we should keep admin shops because you never know when a business is gonna decide that it's gonna close on itself, or there's gonna be a scarcity of items for any such reason. I agree we keep admin shops, but I just think if we higher the price of those more common goods, that it'll give the other lower businesses a chance to actually thrive, and without having to remove admin shops, of course. We just keep them.
What I'm saying is I initially had under my term admin shops down to a very bare minimum,
Mhm.
and more admin shops got added as I was gone. This was either response, but I might be the measure too extreme. I'm saying, what's if we were to increase prices? What's to say they will stay that way?
And of course, that's not a promise everyone can keep. It's not our server, of course. It's the administration's. We can only make so many suggestions and get help from them. But if we want to battle inflation, which is also a server-side problem, then it's just kind of what we need to act upon. We need to do our part. But obviously, Dragon is controlling the server. He's the one who runs everything, and we can't always keep him in line, especially if there's people who constantly go over to him with complaints about these high prices. And so no one can make a promise that has to do with server side things, but we can only do our best. I have a question for Mr. Jackson.
Yep.
You talked about you were wanting to battle the inflation of the housing market with the help of social programs, but how are you going to stop prices of houses from skyrocketing?
I never said I would do anything with social programs because that won't actually really help. I think we can prevent the price from skyrocketing by, well, first of all, people use real estate as a way to make money. So if we can prevent them from being overly reliant on that as a source of income, then the prices will naturally fall. And in addition, if we can just increase the amount of housing there is by working with the administration, then the pricing will fall. But I believe that if we keep the supply at like a good, consistent rate, then we won't have to deal with this issue as much. Additionally, if people, as I said earlier, can make money in other ways.
The problem is that I've seen, and that Ultimate or Carl has seen, is that even when new houses are added at a fairly cheap price to try to combat this, they end up going and skyrocketing at very competitive prices. Look at the new set of West Hedges that were added to the West Hedge area for all the older players who understand, and the SF houses. As soon as they're bought for those low prices to those people who don't have properties, they're ultimately flipped for more money and then flipped for more money again until the price gets out of control and none of these low income players can buy it.
Yes, and that's because people are using real estate as the only way they can make money. They're looking at this house and saying, wow, I can buy that for really low and replicate what all the millionaires are doing and simply flip it for a much higher price, because that's the only way they see that they can make a real amount of money. But if we can provide them with a different way to make money, then they won't have to be overly reliant on those houses, and they can buy these properties and use them to either grow their business or actually live in.
Do you mind if I speak?
Yeah.
Just to kind of almost retort to this, but I do want to say that there are issues that were out of both the president's control and anyone else's control, and that's usually duping. I feel like this has to do with the major part of the inflation and why a lot of the housing prices go up. Because people who dupe large amounts are willing to pay any price, and this eventually launches the housing prices into more. What's the word for it? But it is a men's side, but you do have to realize this is an issue out of our control.
Okay, well, time is over for open debate. We're going to move on to the next topic, which is definitely going to go past the time limit we have. Police/crime. Right. First question. Let's start with this one. We'll start with Mr. Jackson. How do you plan to ensure that the law enforcement respects the legal rights of suspects and detainees if you do not believe those rights are already adequately observed?
I think that what we're seeing right now is a huge influx of new police officers into our law enforcement offices. And that because of this, there's a lot of officers that don't exactly know what to do in these situations. They don't know that they can stop and actually talk to these suspects and allow them to present the evidence of what really happened from their side. What we're seeing right now is a bunch of officers who are, for the most part, inexperienced in the field. And I believe that the training department needs to step up, and like they have been doing in recent days, step up and work with these new officers to get them to the level that Vintage police should be held to. I think that right now we've got the numbers down. We have all the numbers. We just need to focus on the quality. And additionally, part of this is simply improving the relationship between the cops and the police officers. The cops and the citizens, because if the citizens don't trust the cops, they're not going to help them. They're not going to explain what happened. They're going to be much less forthcoming with information. So if we can allow these cops to simply give warnings for things that aren't as big, like making honest mistakes, then there will be a lot less accusations of police abuse, and we can actually have a much better relationship between the cops and citizens. Understatement.
Carl.
Some issues that aren't necessarily pertaining to any of the training or the police or the criminals happen to come with metagaming. I think this is a huge issue when it comes to liberating and other topics. And I think this is just a problem that really comes down to administration side. I do agree that police RP and other aspects of this is criminal could be improved. Some training may cops be going into early. Some cops may be not necessarily passing on the knowledge that they can be. Other issues pertaining to the metagaming part is usually, like we said, out of control. This is basically issue where someone and someone else are in the same Discord. It's a huge issue, and it's how do we enforce this? I don't know. We just kind of have to live with this in this case. I could not offer you any kind of solutions on this other than to other than that, end statement.
I stated in policy 4 criminal rights in my campaign Discord. For all of you who have been aware, it is a good focus of mine to be giving the criminals more rights than they have. What it should be as of now should be innocent until proven guilty, not guilty until proven innocent. A lot of the time, cops arrive on a situation and jail someone because they saw something in their broadcast chat rather than investigating the situation themselves. It's countless. I've seen it with my own eyes. People being arrested because they saw their name pop up as wanted in 911 broadcast. When they go to ask the other officer, "What did this guy do?" They don't know because they've already died and have NLR. Some of it we can't control. We can't control the metagaming. We can't control any of that, just like Carl said. But what we can control is giving the criminals a right to speak for themselves and let them defend themselves. If they can provide evidence or provide proof that they are innocent, we should give them that chance. We have these police stations, we have holding facilities. You can put a criminal in there and let him fight for his right to be released and prove his innocence, which how it should be, instead of just taking them straight to jail and not giving them any time or any chance at all to speak of their own on their own case. End of statement.
Okay. Next topic, Owen, go ahead.
A part of the criminal process is prison, and should the prison include rehabilitative programs, and if so, what should they be? Vitler, you can start this one.
I do see that there has been probationary programs under one of the past wardens that I've really respected at his time, Owen Grills. He made a rehab program and was able to communicate with the criminals properly and give them probation. And that was a really good idea. And I haven't seen much of it anymore, mostly because the Department of Corrections is, quite frankly, dead. There aren't prison guards in the prison to be able to do these rehabilitative operations, which I think there should be. And some of these things could be they could work as medical staff and help create cures for these bioweapons that are happening in order for a lesser sentence if theirs is very broad and extensive. And there's also many other things that they could be doing within the prison instead of just sitting there in a cell rotting the entire time. And I do believe that if some criminals made an honest mistake, they should be given a chance to be let out earlier than they were put in for. But multiple offender obviously should not be given the same permissions and rehabilitation rights as someone who's a first-time offender or is only there for petty crimes. Some people are arrested because they denied a parking ticket, and we treat them like they were in there because they murdered 15 people. I just think we need to overall improve our prison system, and I do believe that it is in the best interest of our Department of Corrections to have those rehabilitation services.
Okay, Mr. Arthur, what is your view on this matter?
Personally, when it comes to rehabilitation, I believe it is possible. I believe that many people can improve their attitudes through aspect of maybe such as maybe like including programs within prison that they can do while during their sentence, offering benefits and for those who decide to leave a life of crime. This is going to be through the government taxation. However, this would be such as programs such as maybe sorry, I'm not feeling so good right now, but I think I just have to end my statement. I'm really not feeling so good right now. Sorry.
That's fine. Mr. Jackson.
I agree that we should have different programs in prison to make prison more of a role play experience for these people, and that if people are arrested for things that are not as severe as going out and murdering 70 people, then they should be offered these services to improve their life in prison and maybe let them out early. I believe we can work with the Department of Health and Human Services to get these people like psychiatric help and add more role play in that way, so they can actually learn what they're doing wrong, maybe promote more programs to help them get back on the right track out of prison. And that way we can find better ways for these people to spend their time in prison, and that way we can prevent them from going back. I don't think that the people who are, like Vitler said, being arrested for parking violations should be treated as harshly as they are. I think that we do need to revive the Department of Corrections and allow these prisoners more of a chance to prove themselves, to prove that they aren't that they have changed and that they can be better, and that we need to give them the tools to be better. End of statement.
Thank you. So, guys, as you know, there are many law enforcement agencies within Vindex. How do you plan to ensure coordination between law enforcement agencies under the Department of Justice and the VTP and Secret Service? Mr. Jackson, how do you believe that you're going to ensure coordination between these different departments?
I believe that right now there is decent communication between the departments, but we do need to work on when these departments are actually responding to the crimes, because currently you'll see officers requesting that Secret Service show up as backup, but the Secret Service aren't sure whether or not they can actually come and actually do that job. We need to make it more clear for all of these officers when they can help, when they don't have to help, and they just need to make it more clear when they're on duty, when they're off duty. That way, everyone is on the same page. Everyone knows what's going on, and also improving the use of voice communication and joint ops is extremely vital to increasing the way that each department works together. Because if they're all in the same voice call then they can all know what they need to do, and they can all be like working together. Additionally, I think that we have more frequent communication between the leaders of these departments so that they can work together to find solutions and figure out what the real problems are of this issue and work on improving the way that 911B is used between criminal organizations. I mean, between different law enforcement organizations. So I believe that in essence, we really just need to work on communication between the leaders and figuring out when these people are actually going to be on duty performing normal law enforcement action and when they're not. Thank you.
Don't you believe that these methods have been tried and tested, such as RTO within a Discord community, and that there's some people will not speak?
Well, yes, but even if you can listen, then that's still extremely helpful, because if you can just be on the same page and just be hearing everything that's happening, then that's still better than just being completely isolated or having to stop and like having to not know where everyone else is, because they can't exactly type in the middle of a war zone, or if they're protecting someone else, they can't exactly just stop and type for that. But if we can use voice communication and have the people who can't talk in voice just talk in 911B, then even that will improve communication between these law enforcement departments.
Thank you. Carl, what is your view on this matter about communication between different law enforcement teams?
Communication is definitely an important tool that can be used by anyone, anywhere. In fact, I know a lot of criminal discords are very well organized, and I feel like that comes down to the fault on us, the Vindex Police Department. It feels like when a criminal organization is far more organized than, say, the VPT, what are we doing wrong? What are we doing wrong when criminals are far more organized than our police department? I feel like we need to be able to go into the system, find out what works, what doesn't work. Why can't our organizations work together in such a way that the police department can easily contact and work with the TSO or VIA or anything where it's needed? Personally, I feel like some of the failures come down to maybe a little bit too much strictness. We have too many policies in there that involve keeping certain aspects for the communication, and this turns people off. And I feel like it revamping Discords, getting people who know what they are doing to organize these things. And I'm just going to end it now.
Are you saying that this issue of communication solely relies onto the VPD? You just do it's the Department of Justice's issue relating to our Discord. Doesn't this issue rely upon the Secret Service and VTP to also engage with the Department of Justice?
I personally believe that it's more organized under one department. Is probably going to be our better aspect. All law enforcement under the Attorney General, and just making sure the DOJ, just to maintain.
So what you're saying is that all law enforcement agencies should be under the Attorney?
I believe they should be under one branch.
Very interesting view, Mr. Arthur. Vitler, what is your view?
Do you want me to explain this, or
we can probably? There's a question relating to that, Mr. Arthur. Vitler, what is your view on the communication issue within law enforcement agencies?
I'd have to disagree. I don't think the Discords are bad at all. I've been in many of them, and I think they're all very organized. And the VPD and DOJ, VTP, they all do very good jobs in making sure that they have proper communication channels for all they need. But the problem with departments communicating with each other is that they don't meet on a regular basis. They don't particularly talk to each other on a normal basis. They only talk to each other when they want to communicate a current crime scene, not just like outside of it. And yes, you can improve your Yes, we should be advocating for people to be talking in voice communications, but you say that, but the problem with that is that they could also be metagaming in those voice channels. We don't know. But when communicating between departments, what each department actually needs is a liaison program, which would basically dedicate 1 or 2 members of each department in coordinating with all other departments that are all law enforcement. And you don't see enough of that nowadays. The VIA does it very well. They have their own OPA Discord for their public affairs, where they come and recruit different liaisons from each department. And I think the DOJ and the VPT should be doing the same thing. I think that if they have meetings on regular basis, then they would be more willing to work with each other. And maybe if we had a universal procedure for what department should be arresting for which crimes, then I don't think this would be as much of an issue. End of statement.
So we're going to move it into the 4-minute open debate. Okay, do you wish to start off this phase, or?
Not really.
Anyone else on the floor would wish to take it? Go ahead.
Yeah, I got one. Kane, you say that improving voice communications or getting more RTO channels would improve the communication between departments, but when each department is doing their own thing and arresting for their own crimes and going through their own procedures, how is it going to help them if they're all in the same voice call doing different things?
Well, something that the DOJ has recently implemented is more than one joint ops voice chat communication. So that way, if two different law enforcement agencies are doing two different things, they can be in different channels. But if they need to talk with the other one, they can simply move channels and quickly convey some information, then move back and continue talking with one another. If we can add more of these channels, then we can have more operations going on at the same time, while still allowing them to quickly communicate with the other departments.
But isn't it also true that the Department of Justice doesn't control all of these departments? They're all different. VTP is not under the DOJ, neither is the VIA or Secret Service.
Yes, they're not all under the same department, but that doesn't mean they can't work together. That's the entire point of the question, is that they need to be able to work together more. So by providing these channels for them to work together, not saying that they need to use them, but if we can encourage them to use them, then it'll greatly improve the communication that we have between these agencies.
Is that all from all the candidates? Carl, do you want to?
That's all from me.
I would just like to clarify. Sorry, my bad. I was looking at some incorrect policy for the last statement on mine. Like, just make that clear.
Of course. If none of you also have to add anything, I just like. Sorry, go ahead.
Just going to clarify. Sorry, we would admit to maintain the general branches having their own access to their departments for enforcement. So Secret Service would remain under the Department of Department of Treasury and such. And that's end.
Thank you. So before we move on to our next topic, I would further like to thank Lewis Enterprises for sponsoring this debate. Lewis Enterprises, this is a statement from the Chief Executive Officer. Lewis Enterprises is a company that strives to advance the business world and any ideas of others, supporting other businesses and being a big global power player. As a long-time businessman and member of the community, I understand the lack of professional companies and hope to change that. We plan on having a private headquarters and a couple of other valued properties that we can be rented out by small companies. We want to be known globally as a large competitor in all forms of business, whether it be financial, investing, or arms supporting to a purchasing government. Apologies. Here at Lewis Enterprises, we will be creating a central business to those around the world.
Thank you again to Lewis Enterprises for sponsoring this debate. It would not be able to happen without them sponsoring it and paying for a lot of the stuff that's here today.
Thanks to them.
One controversial issue that President Brock decided to fluctuate throughout his term was taxes. So should taxes be raised or lowered during the week, or should it be a fixed rate where taxes stay the same throughout the whole term? Vitler, do you want to start off with this one?
Sure. I don't believe there's really a central need to be lowering and raising taxes. Honestly, the economy decides to move at a steady rate. So I think we should stay at a fixed rate of taxes. There's no need to be fluctuating them, especially when we have a big enough fund as it is. People don't even notice when they're taxed most of the time. If it's so low, like it has been, it was $10, now it's $0 for the rest of his term. Taxes are such a little effect on people's payroll that as long as it stays $25 and under, that's where it should be, and there's no point in fluctuating it. We just keep it a fixed rate.
Mr. Arthur?
Taxes, as I agree with my opponent on this one, taxes are at a point where really don't need to affect anything much. And that's really it.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson.
I think we need to focus less on how much we're taxing the people and more that we're actually taxing them, but we're actually using their tax money for what it should be used for. I don't think it really matters whether or not we fluctuate the taxes, but something that I do like is giving tax breaks and tax holidays on certain days or for large events. That way people can come on and actually save their money. And I think it is nice to have taxes lowered on certain days for the week when there's more players online, because we're making more money like regardless, no matter really what the price is. So lowering it by $10 is still, you're still making a lot of money. So I think that I would probably continue lowering the taxes during the weekdays because it is nice for the players who play actively for the entire week. But I think that's not really the central issue. I think we should be focusing more on actually using the tax money.
Is that the end of your statement?
Yeah, end of statement.
Okay, great. So how will the citizens of Index Nation see how their money is spent? Again, your current vice presidential candidate is John de Very Best, who is currently the Secretary of the Treasury. What will your candidate, the Secretary of the Treasury, do to make sure that the people of Index Nation will constantly see how the tax money is being spent?
Something that John de Very Best, my vice president, did during his tenure as the Secretary of Treasury was creating a budget sheet where every transaction is logged, all the tax money is inputted, and so that the public can see where the tax money is going and how it's being used. I think we'll be continuing the system and allowing the people to see exactly what their money is being used for, because this is the money of the people and they deserve to see what it's being used on. So that's how I plan to improve the transparency of our tax money. End of statement.
Great. Mr. Arthur, what is your plan? Making sure that every citizen of Index Nation sees where their tax money is being spent.
I showed an amazing model of organization by our current former of the House, Fracture Gas 7, demonstrated how Congress keeps track of all the laws and I just skip me. I'm sorry.
Mr. Vitler, how?
I believe the Department of Treasury has been doing a great job informing its citizens on the changes in the tax department. And as simply put, the quarterly report of where taxes go each quarter should just be a general information spreadsheet that is in their respective Discord, and all people, anyone is free to join and go and look at that document. And along with that, I have full faith in my proposed Secretary of Treasury, Shakespeare Dano, who is prominently one of the founders of the Treasury Department and has worked with it ever since its creation and has only tried to improve it. And I believe that his former skill level and where he was working with the department can be brought back. And as of right now, like I said, the Department of Treasury is running very smoothly. And I've already made my policy on government transparency. So, end of statement.
Thank you. Final question before we go into the... apologies for the timer noise. Final statement before we get into the open debate. Again, which government... Sorry, apologies. Mr. Vitler, which government departments or agencies should receive greater funding and which should receive less? And how are you going to make sure that it is based out proportionally?
Honestly, it should be, they should make their own requests for their funding. Some departments don't need as much funding as others, such as I understand that the VIA has spoken off before and said that they do not need funding for a certain amount of time. And there's other departments like the Department of Justice who would like to have more funding because they want to give their new officers a step up and not have them pay and let them save their money to buy materials. So really, it should be a department to department, like it should be their own. It should be their own responsibility to come and ask for a certain budget. And if we can give them a quarterly report on how much that there is in the tax bracket, then after each department directly asks for how much they want out of that budget, then we can go out from there. But I believe the departments with more activity should be given more of a budget, such as the Department of Justice, the Department of Transportation, and the DoD. End of statement.
Thank you, Mr. Vitler. Mr. Arthur?
Actually, I do have a personal stance on this one, but I believe the medical industry should be receiving more funding. I see too many doctors ending up to pay up their for their own cures using their own money that they earn from their job, rather than which should be the government paying for it, especially if they're going to give them out for free to the population of the Vindex. Recently, we had an issue where we had plague attacks on this bank and the rest of the city. I got to a point today where I decided to take my time to make a donation of cures, just so doctors did not have to pay for countless dollars of their own money for cures, just to give out. And it's really their own goodwill. They're honestly the doctors we have, and I am thankful for them and that they handled the situation with tact and with fantastic response. And from this, I believe, at least from this medical department, other than that, I would not know the issues. I would love to do it also a form that doctors can claim whenever they create cures to get back reimbursement. And statement.
Thank you. Mr. Jackson, what's your stance on this?
I believe that we need to focus on equipping our law enforcement officers with the materials and the weapons they need to go out there and keep our streets safe. Especially the police force, they constantly put themselves on the line for the safety of our citizens. So what we need to do is make sure that they're constantly supplied with what they need to go out there and do that job. We need to provide them with ammunition, with guns, with armor to keep them safe on the streets and to keep us safe on the streets. Additionally, our military needs to be properly funded. That way they can go out and fight for us. That way they can keep our country, our national security safe. Something I also agree with Carl on is the DHHS. They definitely need more funding. But additionally, not just for cures, but also to vaccinate all of our entire government and anyone else who needs them. Everybody needs to be vaccinated, especially with the new bioweapon attacks. And the money for those cures and vaccinations should not be coming out of the pockets of the doctors. So I believe that these departments need more funding and more just supplies in store, just so that they can have this money ready and all this money ready to use it whenever they need it, and have the supplies ready whenever they need to use them. That's my stance.
Great, thank you. We'll move into the open debate stage. If anyone wants to take it away, they may.
This question is directed to either of you. Whichever one of you would like to answer first, go ahead. Do you guys believe in an emergency fund? And if so, what should be, or what percentage of the overall fund should it be?
Well, currently the Treasury is sitting on about $5 million, and I believe we need to keep at least half of that, just in case another big event happens, like let's say another military base is destroyed, or we're starting like a new housing project and we need to use that money for that project. Then we need to have that money in stock no matter what comes at us. We need to be ready for whatever hits us. We can't just be caught off guard by these big events. We need to be ready just in case anything does happen.
Also, in the event of a major terrorist attack, if though not many have happened on the shores of Vindex, we do need to be prepared for another. Just recently, actually had a gas station was attacked within Seawall. This was a terrible event, and we need to work to be able to prepare ourselves for that, whether it's an emergency response from our military or anything funds that would require us to help us recover from these events. As well as such as a church, and also in the case of another event such as bioweapon attacks, that we need to be able to have the money to keep our doctors well equipped to deal with these kind of situations. The end.
If no one else has to add anything onto this, I think we can move on to our final topic if no one has any objections.
Nope.
Final topic is foreign policy. An event just happened recently, as I'm sure you're all aware, that the formerly Wilden in Exile, decided to invade the Kingdom of Wilden. Do you support this current government of Wilden, formerly Wilden in Exile, or should the former government be restored? And what actions will your administrations be taking on this matter? Akian, do you want to ask away first?
All right. I believe that back in July, Vindex Nation should not have gotten involved in that attack. We should not have completely disrupted their entire government and put in our own. We should have stayed out of that militarily. We should have let those countries figure it out for themselves. And I believe that we should continue just staying out of it, because at the end of the day, Vindex is a powerful country, and we should not be getting involved in all the affairs of these other countries. They should be able to work it out for themselves. I believe that Vindex can possibly serve as a mediator between these countries to hopefully maintain peace. But in the event that peace is not achieved, we should not be militarily getting involved. As long as these people are being treated with fair human rights, there's no like slavery or something going on, then I believe that Vindex should not be getting involved militarily, at least. End of statement.
Mr. Arthur?
Foreign issues are a complex one. Up until the last few years, Vindex had really no foreign relations with anyone, with the exception of a rare exception of Slytopia. This government is now dealing with 2, 3, and 8 popping up foreign governments that around the Santa Maria area. Now, while I agree that we should maintain a peaceful and prosperous relationship with them, we should always be prepared for the possibility that they attack or threaten the Vindex Nation in any way, whether it's militaristically, economically, or even through funding terror attacks on our shores. While I say we maintain this peaceful relationship, we must always be aware of the threat that they can provide. Speak softly, carry a big stick. End statement.
Mr. Vitler, what's your stance on this?
In regards to Wilden in Exile and Courland and them taking over their former government, that is, and to say as it is, that's not Vindex's problem. They had their own little civil war, and as long as it's not affecting the well-being of our country, then we shouldn't be getting involved. Unless, of course, since we are in the UN, the United Nations, which is fairly new, unless the UN requests support, then that's when we should go and we would fight for whatever cause they're going for. But what is also a problem is that the United Nations was formerly run by Prime Minister Mitch of Wilden in Exile, who's now Prime Minister of what is Wilden now. And that's why LEC and Vindex Nation both pulled out of the United Nations agreement. And if it's going to be a problem that they cannot respect the regulations and procedures of the United Nations, then obviously it will be our problem. But I think most foreign relation duties should be left to the Secretary of State, along with and then cooperating with the United Nations, as they are the mediator between all countries.
Thank you. Sorry. On the subject of the United Nations, how will your administration interact with the United Nations?
Obviously, we will have our own delegate or ambassador to the United Nations, and they will bring back the information to the Secretary of State. And through that, if they need to communicate with the president, then that's what it will be. But I don't think the president needs to be directly involved with the United Nations at all times, because unless, of course, it is a point of war or some sort of invasion. But I would definitely leave that to the Department of State, which would be under Mr. Tom Cubed. The statement.
Okay.
Mr. Arthur?
I do agree with Vitler on that point. We should be limiting the powers of government. We should not be expanding any wartime powers or peacetime powers to the president that don't need to be expanded to the president. The the UN is definitely a useful tool that can help maintain peace, balance, and prosperity for all nations involved. So long as it is properly managed itself and benefits everyone that takes part of it, I see no reason to go against it. As well, it seems as not only does it prevent wartime, but it increases political and trade to promote the wealth of all nations. And statement.
Mr. Jackson, how will your administration interact with the United Nations?
I will also be promoting a Secretary of State, and which is David. I believe that he will do a great job of communicating with the United Nations and ensuring that Vindex Nation has solid relationships with every other country, and that we can continue our peaceful and friendly relationships with each one of them. We do need to put Vindex first, but I believe that we can work with these other nations in order to ensure that there are that everything is going well and peacefully in the global scale. We'll constantly be making sure, like we'll be in constant communication between the United Nations and between my the president, me, hopefully, that we'll be making sure that everything is going well and that we know what's going on in the UN and it's all going smoothly. End of statement.
Thank you. And I think one of the final questions within this topic is, all of the three of you have appointed a Secretary of State. Okay, and yours is the only one that differs from the other two candidates. You picked David. So what will each of your Secretary of States do if they are to be appointed, and what should their duties be? Mr. Jackson, do you want to answer first, and then we'll work our way down left, and after this we'll have the open debate.
All right, so my Secretary of State, David, is extremely experienced in foreign relations. He's served in a variety of positions, so I believe that he'll do an amazing job. And I think that my administration will work to make sure that, well, the Secretary of State, me and him have already picked out a few ambassador picks. We're going to have ambassadors for each country in addition to having a representative for the United Nations. The Secretary of State will obviously deal with foreign relations and ensuring that those are solid and secure. And also just making sure that there are treaties made with different countries regarding different things, including trade. We want to increase trade between countries. And we've been working very closely together to ensure that these things happen and have made plans for them to happen. So he will mostly be focusing on those types of things, increasing trade between countries, increasing relations between countries. And that's the type of thing that he's going to be doing.
Mr. Arthur, what will your Secretary of State's remit be?
Our Secretary of State is Atom Cubed. We believe that he is responsible and shows the maturity and expertise that the department requires. From this, we also would like his duties to increase to the UN as well as the foreign and domestic. His job as Secretary of Transport is going to be very integrated within the Secretary of State. We plan on keeping that the same, as well as to basically cut down on government size and to maintain a more manageable government that's under fewer leaders that we can trust and are responsible enough to run the government. We believe. And he's so far done a great job under his current position, and we hope he'll do good in our administration. And statement.
Mr. Vitler, what will your Secretary of State be doing within his role?
I personally was very fond of the work that Tom did as his time as Secretary of State, which was basically doing all things of foreign affairs, which will now include controlling the delegate that they send to the UN and communicating with other countries. Immigration, which used to be a broader topic until we decided to all have open borders. And then that, as well as one of the biggest international industries that we've seen is the VFL, And with a better communication and help from the Department of State, I believe that the policies that are involved there, when borders are closed or people start adding citizenship, I think that we can create a better link between that industry and the rest of the nations that are all involved, with the help of the Secretary of State communicating with everyone, along with other trade opportunities such as the building of ships, which some countries are very advocate about, and I would be open to doing business with all other countries as long as there's no problems such as wartime with them. End of statement.
Great, thank you. So we'll be going into our final open debate stage. As with every open debate before this, you have 4 minutes to question your opponents. Please go away.
Yeah, I have a question for both of you. In the case that our waters are being invaded or pushed into by a foreign country, how are you going to react with knowing that both countries, you and the other country, are in the United Nations?
Well, first, obviously, we're going to bring this issue to the UN. Well, I mean, before we do that, we're obviously going to go out there and see what's going on. We have a strong naval force. We just rebuilt our entire naval base. We have an entire fleet. We're going to send some ships out there to see what's going on and make sure the situation does not escalate any further than it needs to. And then once the situation has calmed down, we'll bring it to the United Nations and work out what happened and work out any potential punishments for them or any agreements that need to be made regarding what they can and can't do in the future regarding that. That's basically a statement.
I personally believe we should start with communication before setting out ships. In the honest mistake that they accidentally sailed into our water, we can resolve the issue without having to send out a fleet. However, if it does begin to escalate, we will show some sort of tour de force in order to make sure that they understand who they're dealing with and that we can peacefully resolve the issues.
Well, the thing is, ships are they're pretty slow. So if there's something going on that's like near the edge of our borders, we need to have a fast response. That way we can actually get there in time and not just send ships like an hour later and it takes another half an hour for them to actually get there. We'd have a quick response. That way we can be ready in case the situation does escalate.
Then the best option, I believe, would be to drop the military in first along our shorelines to make sure that they don't get onto our soil, followed by the deployment of ships in the case that we can blockade them in and they can't escape. If they're pushing into our waters very fast and abruptly, then we should be able to take immediate action. Yes, we can contact them, and if they do say, "Oh, we accidentally sailed into your waters," then yes, we are going to make sure that their course is maintained and to get out of our waters. But what I've seen personally from our military, not our military, but the administrations in the past, is that we've been too reliant on talking with people before an attack happens. I've been told by many military officials that LEC had an incident a couple months back where they were in all the way up to our shores, and instead of our military or anyone else taking action, they instead just let them sit there and tried to communicate, which in favor they could be going and starting a war and trying to take over the state of Santa Maria.
Well, yeah, obviously we're going to have the necessary defense mechanisms, the necessary defense mechanisms in place to ensure that our borders are secure. But additionally, we do need to go out there and just try not to completely just send out bombs and try and destroy them. We should actually not escalate the situation any more than it needs to be. But yes, our borders do need to be secure, and we can work out more in-depth military plans with constant communication with the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the Secretary of Defense, so we can figure out everything we're going to do in that situation should it arise.
That's all from me.
If no one else has to add anything to that, I think we'll be moving into our 30-second closing statements. Carl, do you want to end with a 30-second closing statement?
Sure. I've come out here today to represent the Supreme campaign. I hope I did an adequate job. I know I had my faults, and I know that you hopefully can look beyond them and get the point that I said. I have nothing but reverence for my two candidates, and if anyone has any questions for me or Supreme, please come after the debate. I am willing to answer.
Mr. Jackson?
Something that a lot of people have questions about for me is that they're really concerned about the amount of experience I have on the server. But I just like to assure everybody that I have been on this server for playing consistently for the past 10 months. Only about 1 or 2 of those was in the criminal world, but that was for a reason. That was because I was trying to protest against the Wellington administration, and once I figured out how not to do that, I instantly joined the government. Also, I just like to say that I've been consistently playing on this server for the past 10 months, basically like almost every day, and I've seen
Thank
the
you,
problems.
Mr. Jackson.
Okay.
Mr. Vitler?
I would like to thank every person who's come out today and supported all of us candidates here at the debate tonight. I know you all came out of your way to come and sit here and listen to us talk. If you want any more information about me, you can either message me or go to my Discord, and I'm more than happy to answer questions. I hope for a respectable and clean election, and make sure all of you go and vote. End of statement.
Great, thank you, Mr. Vitler. Before I end the debate, I would firstly like to thank Yem for organising the debate, Exishi for doing the photography, David for security, and once again, Lewis Enterprises for helping us host this debate. Without Lewis Enterprises, this debate wouldn't have been possible. I would also like to thank Ellenham for moderating at the start of the debate, but sadly he had to go due to some issues.